Hey, welcome everyone. And today I have the great pleasure to introduce you Jeff Smith. And Jeff, what are you actually doing for Oracle? You're a product manager for tools, etc. Maybe introduce yourself.
So I annoy people online in my spare time. And then when I'm not doing that, I help build most of our development tools for the Oracle database. So things like SQL Developer, our data modeling solution, SQL CL. And then we've been starting to bring a lot of this technology to the web. So not just if you're in the Oracle Cloud, but if you are in the Oracle Cloud, we have a web interface to work with the Oracle database itself. And I'm going to be showing some of that today when it comes to the JSON document stores you can put in Oracle database.
Right. Yeah, in the past we often covered SQL expressions, sometimes SOTA, and I used various UIs to show this. Often SQL Developer installed on my machine here, sometimes even SQL Plus. And most recently, I found out that the SQL Developer Web is really useful to show things, especially since people can just try it out themselves. Because all they need to do is sign up for the always free tier, and then they get a 19C or 21C database. And that's what you're going to show us today, right? How to work with our
I'd like
browser
to,
tools.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
Then I won't
if you're
stop
if
you.
you're
Go
sitting
ahead.
back,
All yours.
thanks, Beta. Beta is the JSON expert, by the way. So if I get stumped on any of your JSON questions, I can fall back on Beta. And if you're not a cloud person, your company or your organization is 100% on premises, sorry. The technology I'm going to show you is also available to you. So this is not a cloud exclusive feature. It's just a lot of times we end up debuting this feature in the cloud first. And as Oracle employees, we don't get paid if we don't make everything about the cloud. So definitely tried the always free autonomous service, and there are various shapes or versions of that you can try out. One of those being a JSON implementation of the autonomous system. There's also something called transaction processing and one called data warehouse. I'm going to be using, I'm doing a live demo with my Wi-Fi connection from the eastern part of the US up to the Washington, DC area in a real live production cloud environment. So I'm living somewhat dangerously. But if you were to take Oracle REST Data Services, or what we call ORDS, and run that as a mid-tier application or Java servlet in something like Tomcat or WebLogic, you can have your own SQL Developer Web in your browser. So I'll talk a little bit about that stuff, and then I'll jump straight into the fun things. And as we go through this, and by the way, I'm going to try to do this in like 20 or 30 minutes, so I'm not going to take the whole hour of your time if we don't need it. But as we're going, if you want to ask questions, just type them into the Q&A
I'll
section,
monitor it, yeah.
and
And
Beta,
I'll
as he
monitor it.
can, will
Yep.
moderate those for us. And then, of course, we can always take questions at the end. And the first question is always, Beta, what is this being recorded, right? And
Yep.
yes, it is. It's being recorded. It'll be on YouTube in a few days after this. And I will post my slides somewhere as well. Probably you can get them on my website, thatjeffsmith.com. Okay. So this is my contact info, and most of you hopefully have this. If not, take a screenshot. If you're going to email me, don't forget the middle initial. Jeff.Smith is Exadata software engineer, and he doesn't like getting SQL developer questions. So on this title slide, you see it's called Database Actions. Instead of treating SQL Developer Web as like this separate component or like auxiliary interface for the database, especially in the cloud, we're treating it as just a collection of features that are part of the database. So when you want to interact with the database, we have this menu in there called Database Actions. And from there, you can see things like SQL, REST, JSON. So those are your interfaces for interacting with the database using those technologies, or there's a modeling screen, or there's an administration screen, or there's a performance screen. So I'm probably going to be guilty of calling this SQL Developer Web for the next 5 to 10 years, just out of habit, and also because I kind of like that name better. But it really truly is a core part of the database experience. And in the next year or so, as new versions of the Oracle database come out in cloud and on-prem, it's going to replace EM Express. So when you go to spin up the web page out of your Oracle database, you're not going to have EM Express anymore. You're going to have what we're calling here as database actions. So I thought this was an American show, The Late Show with David Letterman. He used to have this segment called Stupid Pet Tricks. And he'd have regular people come onto the TV show with millions of people watching, and they would demonstrate the funny things their pets could do. I don't know why I called it this, because this isn't really a stupid trick. It's actually kind of a cool trick. As an example of what you can do with the Oracle database in your JSON, I took my Twitter feed. I think I joined Twitter in 2010, 2009. I can't remember, 2008 maybe? 2008 sounds about right. And I've been tweeting a lot since then, and I've got like something like 120,000 tweets. So you can go into twitter.com and you can ask for all of your personal data to be made available to you, and you'll never believe what format they share that in beta.
JSON. XML.
JSON. Yeah. Not XML, it's JSON. And it's not well documented, but if you go into the zip file, the biggest file in there is going to be the collection of tweets for your account. So I went and stood up my always free autonomous system, not the JSON specific one, although you could totally do it there. I just did it for the transaction processing one, which is kind of a general use purpose database. And I created a collection, which is under the tables, a table with a column in there reserved for the JSON content. And using one of the APIs that the JSON team provides, SODA is what we kind of call this collection of features, the Simple Oracle Document Access. Did I say that right? Simple Oracle. Yeah, Simple Oracle. We're so bad about acronyms. I hate acronyms, but it does save us a few syllables. So there's a REST API delivered along with SODA. And in a single curl request, I was able to send up this huge JSON file, which had an array of records in it. And the underpinning tech, words in this case, was able to split each of those records into new rows, so to speak, or documents, as we would refer to them in the JSON document store paradigm. So in my Oracle database, I have this collection called That Jeff Smith Tweets. And in that collection, I've got about 98,000 documents, because the archive I was using is a couple years old. It takes a long time for them to compile that, and I didn't feel like waiting. So I just got my tweets from the last, like the first 8 years of what I'd done. So some of the things you can do once that data is in the database is use things like SQL. So as a JSON developer, as a JSON first mindset, I'm looking at this stuff as a collection of documents, and in those documents are these JSON bits of information. You know, they could be pretty flat and generic, and almost look like a table, or they could be nested, complex things, and arrays of all of those. And the beauty is, as you want to add descriptors or pieces of information to your data, you know, you don't have to alter the definition of the table. You can just live update the schema, and you've got the applications keying off what's in the JSON document. Okay, well, I want to get information out, and SODA gives us this thing called query by example, or you'll see it referred to as QBE. And so I can speak JSON to the database and get JSON back. So in my QBE, I'm basically sharing a snippet of a JSON document that describes what I want the data to look like for it to match. Now I'm using a cheat here. I'm using a text index, and it's going across all of my JSON documents looking for any occurrence of the word JSON or JSON. And it found those, and I also asked it to sort the data coming back from the database using this attribute in the collection called ID. And the very first tweet I ever tweeted with the letters JSON in them was this tweet, all the way back in 2012, so to speak. Now, if I were to go into my SQL worksheet and run this query instead, I get the same data back. So in my schema, I have a table called that Jeff Smith tweets. It's quoted because in the JSON world, things are case sensitive. And if you ask for a collection that looks like this, it gets created as that in the database, as that with that case. And then here's my where clause, and we can see the search pattern in the string. I took off the order by, but the order by bit would look like this. So the reason I want to start with this is when by the way, I've been doing database stuff not that long compared to some of you, or maybe even compared to beta, maybe since 1998 or so. But that, for the majority of that time, is always SQL first for me. But starting in about 2012 or 2013, Oracle started doing more and more of JSON development in the database, basically as a replacement for XML, or as a recognition in the industry that XML and SOAP were being phased out, and JSON was becoming much more popular. And I'm a product manager for ORDS. So and Oracle REST Data Services and HTTP, JSON is by far the #1 communication method for exchanging information between applications. So I kind of had this mid-career, jolt or jump, like, okay, I can't just always be table and SQL and row oriented anymore. I kind of have to pivot a little bit. And one of the nice things about the Oracle database is you kind of get to choose your own adventure. I don't know if you folks remember those books in the 80s where you'd be on the first page and you'd read a paragraph and then it would say, hey, do you want the next step to be this? Turn to page 37. Or if you want to do this, turn to page 28 or 52. And if you were a kid like me, you would skip ahead. And if you got the wrong answer, you'd come back and start over again and cheat. The Oracle database lets you basically choose your own adventure with JSON in the database. You can bring things in, you can bring a JSON document in and store it as a relational row in the database. You can bring it in as a column in a relational row in the database, or you don't have to worry about tables and columns at all and purely stick to this collection and document mindset. And so what I wanted to show after this really long lead-in was how the tools help you no matter which way or no matter which direction you choose your venture with. So one of the really, really nice benefits of the Oracle database, whether you're using it to work with graph databases, spatial databases, relational, in-memory, columnar, JSON document stores, I'm sure I'm forgetting 10 or 12 of them. They're all backed by the same SQL engine, and they all have the rich data type and PL SQL support, and they all have the really nice tooling support. So the tool, in this case, like I said, this is being renamed as we speak right now to Database Actions, but I'm referring to it here, SQL Developer Web. We've taken the things that you like in that desktop Java application, and we've moved it into the browser as a single-page web application that's delivered by ORDS. Now, if you're in the Oracle Autonomous Cloud, this is stood up and available to you out of the box. And these are all the features we have in it so far. So a worksheet for running queries. So when you spin up your database, you don't have to go get a driver, a connect string. You don't have to worry about port 1521 being open on the network or SSH tunneling through bastions to get to it. No, instead you go to a website. So your web server has been configured to support the database, and there's nothing to install or configure. If you have a Chrome browser or a Safari app on your iPhone, I mean, you could theoretically go in and start running your select star from stuff. You can browse the contents of your database. You can get real-time SQL monitoring reports. You can generate relational diagrams. For those people that still believe in things called foreign keys, beta, I'll explain foreign keys to you later.
I know them very well.
The JSON document store, we built in a brand new interface just for that. And that's what I'm going to talk about. And then we also have an interface for developing RESTful web services, managing your users, and importing data, which I'm going to talk about very, very, very briefly. So I did promise some live demo. This won't be all just PowerPoint, but if you want to make SQL Developer Web available to you, even just on your laptop for your own private database or for a database in your organization, the tool that you need for that is ORDS, or Oracle REST Data Services. And if you go to oracle.com/REST, R-E-S-T, that's where you'll find the download in the docs for that. And if you go to cloudoracle.com and you sign in and you go to your list of autonomous databases, you'll see a tab here called Tools, and you'll click on where it says SQL Developer Web or Database Actions now. I think it may have already just changed.
And for those who don't know, you can actually get a 21C ATP. I don't know when that's possible as of today. So if you want to try these things out, what's new in 21C, it's the same API.
Right. So I'm going to be showing things in 19C, but all of the cool stuff I'm showing, there's this whole other next level, especially for JSON. Probably the biggest thing people have heard of is the native JSON data type for 21C. I know people keep asking for Boolean. It's not there yet for 21C. But so you'll just log in using your normal database account. And then what you have access to is, it's based on the privileges in the database as to what features you're going to have access to. Everyone will get access to a SQL worksheet. The JSON workshop is available if you have a privilege called, it's escaping me, beta. What's the JSON privilege we require? Soda app?
Yeah, grant soda app, but that
grant soda app to,
I never had to do that manually, Jeff. This would always work for me.
Well, if you're the admin user.
Okay, yes, I always use admin if I do my trials.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's right. If you don't, it's called grant soda app to whatever user. Yes. Yeah.
So let me show this home page. So you'll get taken to a page. It's going to tell me that I've timed out. No, okay. So it's going to take me to a page that looks like this, and I do have that role. And so if I click on this, it'll take me to this page where I can do those things which I was calling like the QBEs or the queries. But I want to start instead. Okay, I want to start instead on the SQL worksheet, because a lot of times the first thing you want to do in a brand new database is load data. So, by the way, we have these things called SODA commands where I could create a collection and start putting documents into it. So you can run those from here, just like you could in like SQL CL or a SQL Developer on the desktop. But I want to click this little ellipsis button, say data loading. And you can actually point to XML files, JSON files, and Avro files.
So Avro is converted or loaded as JSON then?
Yes.
Okay.
So Avro is kind of like a specialized JSON that contains like a dictionary or schema
Yeah.
So this is a JSON file, and this cars attribute actually has stuff in it, which we can't flatten out anymore. So it's going to bring this JSON data in as a relational table with 3 columns. And the third column is going to be, this is not the best way to store it, but it's one way to store it. You can store JSON in the database as a varchar2, as a clob, as a blob, or using the JSON native type in 21. And when you use the text versions, there's a check constraint that says, hey, database, there's JSON in this column and only let JSON in. So this little wizard can quickly take relatively decent sized files and put them into the types of tables that a relational developer would be used to using. And they can come in and use straight SQL on this. And then when they want to start pulling attributes out of this cars column, then they'll start using some of the built-in JSON functions and features that we've added to the SQL and PL SQL languages.
So Jeff, the reason that the cars column was not mapped to a varchar or number was because it was a nested array. Is that correct?
Absolutely right. Yep.
Okay.
So
It's what
we could have done something silly and created that column as a nested table and further split it out relationally. But we were like, hey, let's keep it JSON, because I really think that's actually better supported in the database than nested tables. It's more common than what I would find in the wild. I don't see a lot of nested tables out there.
No, that's the big difference between, I think this is the biggest difference between these two data models, that JSON can embed other entities in the form of an array, whereas in the relational schema world, you would not embed entities, but you'd create a separate table. And then you have foreign keys and primary keys. See, Jeff, I've heard this.
So you can kind of have this best of both worlds. So, I've created this collection called that Jeff Smith tweets. It's a very simple table. It can be more interesting than this, but in this case, it just has 2 columns in it, an ID and this column called JSON document, which is a blob. And this is the actual JSON text. So you can kind of see some of my tweets in here. So it saw this JSON. I think it's because it's OSON, which is why some of these control characters are coming back.
Got it. Yes.
Now, this looks much more beautiful in the native handcrafted JSON interface that we built. And I'll toggle that over now. So, so the first time you come into this screen, we're actually going to offer you a tour. You don't have to take this if you don't want to, but if you click the binoculars button, it'll just literally take you on a little quick desktop tour of the UI and show you, here's my list of stuff, here's where you go to run reports, here's where you go to do this. So if someone's brand new to this interface, even to the SQL worksheet or to the REST interface, they have that tour. I might not have created anything yet, so I can create a collection first. So I'll open this slider over here. I'll just be the teacher's pet and call this beta. And that's literally all I have to include. I can include more metadata here if I want, but I'm just going to call it beta. So now I have this empty collection. Nothing's in it. That's not very exciting. So I can upload files. So this button here will just bring up a classic file browser. Here, we'll open this one. So that's one that came in, and now I can immediately start browsing this.
Right, but now the entire record is preserved as a JSON. Now,
yes, this has been unmolested by the database. There's no yucky columns in here. Now I could point to more JSON files. So I could point to like 20 of these at a time if I want. So the problem with me is I never remember if I've got good JSON files to play with or not.
And you could even insert something that looks totally different, right? Because the JSON is just a JSON, so you could mix cars with persons and diseases.
Oh yeah. There's no model, right? It's
This could be good or it could be bad. At least there is nothing.
Let's try a bunch of these and we'll see which ones work.
Yeah.
Now, if any of these fail, it's because there's going to be syntax issues. So 2 succeeded, 3 failed. It says see the log for details. If you ever see that, the log panel is down here. And it's telling me I've got a syntax. So the database itself is saying, hey, this doesn't actually look like JSON. Now, there is some control there in the database. You can say, I'm very lazy, almost let anything in, or you can say, I want to be very strict and only the most gorgeous, pristine, Sistine Chapel-worthy JSON can come in. So if you've ever used some of the other JSON database cloud providers out there, they give you a similar interface where you kind of type in a search and then the list of documents come down to the bottom. That's what we have here. If I double click on a document, I get a full screen view, and I can actually make changes to this if I want. So if I switch this to form view, I can say, well, technically it's in Acura.
Yeah. So you can change the value. Can you also change its data type?
Can I change its data type?
Could you
I mean, I can put anything in there that I want.
Oh, you can add fields. So in the worst case, you could remove a field and
yeah, I could.
Yeah. Let's say you wanted to do
you're getting tricky on me, but yes, you can do that.
Yeah. Oh, there's different ways to render the JSON.
So I can click here and say.
Oh, nice, nice.
Insert.
Yeah.
An array if I want.
Yeah.
Or append.
Yeah.
A string.
Yeah, I have to play with this. This looks very good.
Yeah. Now, the more interesting way to load data is using this REST API that I was referring to. I don't have a UI for it yet. It's coming. And one of the tricks you learn as a web developer is this beautiful or nasty thing known as developer tools. And as you come in here and run queries, you'll see the HTTP call that we make, and that will expose the, so here's the soda. And so there's a URL or URI I'm hitting that's got the word soda in it. And you can see that it's running this thing called action query. And if I come down and look at the payload of the request, the only thing that was sent across were these curly brackets. This is the equivalent of select star from, right? So this pattern will match pretty much any and all JSON document in the database. So this UI we've built is using this REST API that ORDS provides.
Maybe you could issue an actually query here so we see that how it
affects
the URL.
So let's pull, let's go look at a different collection. Let's go look at my tweets. Yeah. So I'll use this text one and then I'll switch over to a more regular. So I unfortunately tweet about this too much. I wouldn't say that I have a problem, but I do it a lot. So this document is quite complex and schema-wise. And if I just look at a pure text view, actually this one's not that interesting. I've got bigger records, it's got more stuff going on. But that's also the beauty of JSON, right? Because it's flexible. They can have more and additional stuff. Oh, here, this one's got more. More additional attributes and data as necessary. You can visualize what these look like. So let me just do that really quick. This button right here, diagram, says, sort of give me a relational kind of view of this document.
That's cool.
Now this is hard to see, I understand, but you can see where the Twitter API guys are like, here's the main body of our tweet, and maybe down here where all of the links that are stored and links to pictures and the metadata on the pictures, and it's quite flexible. So asking this developer at Twitter to implement their data model in a relational table would probably give them nightmares because these would all be tables. and foreign keys and
Yes.
nested
And
things.
every
And
query now, even on a single tweet, would involve a lot of joins.
join this, join
Yeah,
that. And
join
then,
that,
of course, God forbid you use those nasty Oracle joins versus ANSI joins. We won't go down that road. Of course, for us, we think this way out of the box. It's not a big deal for us. We're used to it. But the JSON storage and transfer of information is just, I mean, love it or hate it, JavaScript has brought this to our doorstep, and it's being used everywhere. It's probably just as ubiquitous as HTTP.
Yeah.
Is.
While we are on this mapping, allow me to interrupt you, because there was a question from Earl Lewis: if the database can detect JSON, why couldn't it flatten the cars column any further? The main problem is what we call cardinality. So you have a value, normally in a table, a column has a single scalar value. And with JSON, you can not only have one array, like in the example that Jeff shown, but you can actually have arrays of arrays or sibling arrays. So the data model is more a tree, where you have, it kind of can grow, and one value may have different child values. So Jeff already suggested with nested tables, it might be possible, or you would have to generate a lot of rows. This is what we do with JSON table. If we unnest a nested array, then we generate a separate row for each of these nested items. But this means that all the values outside of that array have to be repeated. So it really may explode the number of rows that you are generating. And in a view, this is fine. But what Jeff was showing is actually how to store it. And there you probably want to avoid storing all these outer values more than once, just because they point to different array items. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Here's the beauty of Twitter, again, biting me in the behind.
Yeah.
So I'm very vain. I like seeing how awesome I am, and Twitter's great for that. So they have an attribute that counts the number of times a tweet has been favorited or liked,
yes,
or hearted or +1, or, you know, whatever their equivalent of that is. So I said, okay, well, show me any tweet that has a favorite count of exactly 75. And I actually had one. And here I am looking at the text, and what happens when you put something popular on Twitter? You have a typo. Now, you can't edit tweets, but this is in a database. I could definitely come in and edit after the fact this record. So I'm double clicking on here to open this viewer, this editor. I'm hitting the escape key to automatically close it. And over here to the right, I've got buttons where I can say edit, clone, which I can say take this document as is and create it as a new document in the collection. I've got copy, which literally puts it to the clipboard. So if I wanted to email this to beta very quickly, I could do that. I have a download button here. So if I have a really large document, I can save this as a JSON file. And I've got the trash can button. You can guess what the trash can button does.
It's recycling it. It's not throwing it away.
It does whatever the delete API does for JSON. Now I've got some history here. So if I come back and do that, if I wanted to clean my my Twitter feed per se, I've got quite a few records that resolve to this search. If I click the trash can up here, it uses this search pattern to find the records to delete. So it's in fact doing a delete from where.
Which is dangerous if you just have the open and closing curly brackets.
Oh, yes. It's like truncate, I guess.
Yeah. So
except probably more recoverable than truncate.
Right. Yeah. So the other way to call these things instead of QBE is also to call them filters. I tend to, I mean, QBE is kind of our official name, but filters also explains maybe a bit better than that.
Yeah.
If you don't have any filter and you click the trash can, it's all gone.
It's kind of like SQL in the sense of you're not telling the database how to get what you want. You're describing to the database what you want.
Right.
So let's see. I've probably wasted a lot of time. I tend to talk too much beta. So we talked about how to upload documents, how to run queries.
I had one question here. Let's say you have a query, maybe the one you have on there that uses contains, and you already mentioned that you had a search index on there, or on your previous query where you had on the tweet count. By the way, we can also do greater, smaller, so we're not
Yes.
limited to equality. These are all equality queries here, but
yeah, they're not nearly as interesting.
right.
And the reason I do it this way is because it's easier to type. So one of the improvements that we have coming to the next version basically is code completion. So I can ask for greater than here, and it completes that out for me. And it's also going to know the schema defined in the JSON document. And so as I'm referencing maybe an attribute inside of an array, maybe the third item in an array, the type ahead, the code completion is going to complete that JSON pattern that describes the filter for you. So this is about to get much, much easier, but right now this is good as your knowledge of the SOTA filter syntax is.
But let's say I wanted to know if that particular query used an index or not. So normally I would use an explain plan to do that, right? Do you have an explain plan here in the JSON workshop?
So what we're going to add,
right?
There's a button here that says SQL. Right now it's very generic and dumb. It just opens up a blank SQL worksheet. What we're getting ready to add to the tool, the SOTA REST API is extremely powerful. I love it. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the REST guy, although maybe I am.
You are the REST guy, yes.
As you run these queries through the API, they have different parameters. In this case, the action parameter is called query. And there's also this thing on that tacked onto the end that says and SQL statement equals true. Well, what does that do? Well, it runs the filter or the QBE, and at the very end of the document that's returned, it splats in the SQL that the database uses.
Exactly, because SOTA is just a
it's just SQL.
gets rewritten.
It's just an Oracle database.
Yeah.
Why is my client not letting me hold down the page down button?
Well, that's a huge result.
Yeah, we should be more restrictive, right?
Maybe
we should say
a term that does not exist, like JJJ. Yeah, beta, probably.
Beta. But I'm gonna have it. I'm gonna have at least
tweeted a lot about me. Oh, you actually?
I have a couple.
Oh, not bad. Okay.
So here it's escaped. But here is the SQL, including the bind variable attached to the SQL statement to go get this. So what we're going to do in the UI, folks, is when you click that SQL button, we will have already gathered this, and we will throw that to the SQL worksheet like this. And then you can ask for, I would say maybe ask for the auto trace, but we'll say explain plan. And then you can see if there's an index, domain index tweets JSON. Yes, it is.
But Jeff, even without, I mean, I like that SQL rewrite. I'm not sure we documented it pretty much, but I think it's a great tool for people to understand that how a query gets rewritten to SOTA. But you could also issue the same query if you just use the SOTA command here, right? You could do SOTA get -f, I believe. Could we just try this out? SOTA get -f. And then just copy the query text from your JSON workshop. Yeah, this one here. I think you have to put it in a single line, though.
Yes, it does not like it when they span lines.
Great, but if you copy this to the, I mean, this is just.
We need the collection name too, right?
All right. SOTA get. Right.
Is it that? And then, is that all it is?
maybe remove this, yeah, just the right size, and there too. Give it a try.
I never type soda commands, folks, because I always use
There
the
it is.
tools.
And now click on the explain plan or the audit trace. So yeah, it's basically missing keyword.
Yeah, I don't think explain plan works on this.
And the audit trace.
We're doing QA.
Okay, I was,
well,
but
we can fix that. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
the point I just wanted to see is that you can use both of these user interfaces. The database action, is this what is called, SQL Developer Web?
Yeah. The
And the
SQL
JSON
worksheet.
Workshop. It's basically two views on the same data, especially if you would want to do some analytics with order by, group by, having, count star, whatever. You would probably run that from here, wouldn't you? Or would that become part of your JSON Workshop at some point?
I think you would do most of that here.
Yeah, exactly.
We talked to different sets of customers, but a lot of the customers that I talk to aren't doing the pure JSON solution. They're doing the hybrid where they have a relational table that they've added a JSON column to.
Yeah.
And for that, I think they would use the SQL worksheet. We're working on a solution where you can have your cake and eat it too, and you can use the JSON interface to look at just that JSON column. Now, of course, you can use the SODA interface to register an existing table as a collection, right? I think.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So
I've not done that, but yeah, so you could do that today.
Yeah, you could map a table or a view as a collection. Yes.
Yeah. So we update this tech as often as every 2 weeks. Major updates come every 3 months or so. Yeah. And I thought, to reward the folks for going through all of my bad jokes, I would just give a preview of some of the things that we have coming in the next few weeks or even days. Database actions is going to show up here, and it won't say SQL Developer Web anymore. It'll say database actions. And it'll take you to this homepage of cards. When you're creating new users in Autonomous, especially, new users don't get quota, so it's a little disheartening when you try to create a table or a collection and it fails. So as you're creating users in the database actions interface for security, you can assign quota at that point. This is the biggest change. So the editors are being completely replaced. The underlying code powering the SQL worksheet itself and the JSON workshop itself. So if you've ever used VS Code, you know they have that command palette beta. It's like Control Shift P or something, and you just get like this really rich menu of things you can do on your text, like regular expressions and search and replace and custom commands. That same technology is going to be built into database actions. It's also going to just look cleaner, and it does support dark mode. You can also control how the fonts are displayed and all of that kind of stuff. When you go over into the JSON view, this is also a new feature. So this isn't there yet. It's coming. Don't go buy this stuff and be mad when it's not there and try to sue Beta and I. This is coming soon. If I pulled a JSON document down and edited it, and at the same time Beta did, and if I posted my change before he did, we'll catch that what we're trying to update is no longer what's actually in the database, and Beta will be presented this view. Here's what you started with. Here's what Jeff submitted. Do you want to accept these changes or not? So I don't know how likely it is that you'd have 2 people in there at the same time, but in an active database, I guess it's.
So is this then meant for, let's say, a DBA who touches live data to correct a mistake made by an app, or what's the typical use?
I don't know who lets developers into production.
Yeah.
But DevOps is kind of code for.
Or DevOps, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This could be in a QAT environment, or I'm sorry, UAT environment or some sort of
Yeah.
data warehouse where you're just doing reporting. I don't know why you'd be updating records, but yeah, we have this thing where two people are changing the same stored procedure and they clobber each other's changes. This will prevent that for JSON documents, or at least give you a heads up.
Yep. Yeah.
We're going to be adding SQL Monitor for all users, regardless if they're DBAs or not. So anyone would be able to see a real-time SQL report. And autonomous, where it's licensed. On-prem, you'd have to basically say, yes, I'm licensed for Enterprise Edition with the tuning pack. This is later this year, not after the next update. We're going to be adding some charting support when you're working with your relational data. In beta, we could theoretically add that for the JSON stuff too. There's no reason.
Well, all we would
couldn't.
need to do is run the JSON data guide that auto creates a relational view over your JSON data, and then you're good. Then you can run that UI tool on top.
And we're creating wizards for that kind of stuff too. So when we're talking about the indexes, we're working on dialogues where you can say, hey, give me a search index. Hey, give me a text index. Hey, give me a this index. And you just type in the attributes. You don't have to know the syntax. We have DataGuard, REST APIs deploying right now. We're going to put screens over that. Same thing for Data Pump. We have REST APIs for Data Pump. We're going to be putting screens over that, so you can call these operations directly in the web app. And then on the cloud side, later this year, you'll be able to run SQL Developer Web or database actions for any database throughout all of OCI, autonomous or otherwise. It could be running on an infrastructure compute node. It could be in a Kubernetes set up in OCI. It could be in an Exadata CS or Exadata CS. It could be in a bare metal, in a VM. If it's in the Oracle Cloud Network, there'll be a spot for our tooling in the OCI menus, and you'll be able to say, hey, here are all my databases. I want to go connect to that one. So everything that we've built is going to be not just for autonomous anymore in cloud. It's going to be for all of your Oracle databases. I talked way longer than I thought I was going to.
Yeah, you're 20 minutes.
That's why I'm a product manager and you're a developer.
Yeah. Well, there's time dilation, right? So you're on another.
Yeah, that's true. Will the Monaco editor also come to the SQL Developer client eventually?
Yeah.
Yes, but not in the way that you think. At some point, we may take the web JavaScript app and publish it as a desktop app. The old JDeveloper desktop tool, I doubt would have Monaco in it, but hey, hope springs eternal. Is the JSON functionality you are demoing available in SQL Developer Web in ORDS 20.4? Also, yes. So the JSON stuff I'm showing is in the current versions of ORDS. I think even if you get ORDS 20.2, it has some of the JSON stuff in it. Although we improved it for 20.4, and we're going to improve it again for 21.1, which we're just kind of finishing it up. And hope to release at the end of the month, beginning of April. So,
yeah,
you got a question about OSON in there.
Exactly. There's a question from Earl. What's the OSINT format? So, in release database release 21C, we have added a new data type for JSON, and that obviously is much better if the data if this is known to be like a real SQL data type. What we've done so far is to use a club or a varchar or blob and use this isJSON check constraint. So that way the database knows that this data is JSON and it shows up in the JSON views, etc. Also from JDBC, there is a flag, for example, to understand that something is JSON. So it's not a bad solution at all, but it is not as good as a really data type for JSON. And that is now available with release 21C. And at the same time, it uses a binary post-parse representation. So the text JSON is a little expensive to parse because you basically have to scan character by character to look for escape sequences, proper closing parentheses, etc. So you have to do syntax validation. And in this binary format, we don't have to do that. So it's a post-parse format. It also uses some optimizations to be able to jump to selected values, so you don't have to stream through the data. And it's also optimized for faster updates. And that's what we call OSIN. That's Oracle's binary JSON format. But the change is pretty transparent. So if you just create a JSON data type, you get that. And in earlier releases, like shown here, you would use a check constraint. This was great, Jeff. I see. I want to add something to it. Like the one big use case is probably an application developer who starts writing these SODA expressions and wants to see the effect of it. Like, is the query returning the result I want, or is the plan good, the index? And if you happen to use one of our languages that we support with SODA, which is Java, it's Python, it's Node.js, there's also C, etc., then you can just copy and paste these filter or QBE expressions into your programming language. So it's really a great, like, makes development a lot easier, I guess. I haven't talked much about the DevOps use case where people touch a production database using this API. So, but I think for
people doing reporting stuff.
Yeah.
Playing. Yeah.
Well,
thanks everyone for your time. I was not expecting this number of people. So I'm always happy to be surprised in a good way.
Is the JSON data type feature backported to 19C? No, it's just too involved. It's basically touches every database feature. A new data type is quite expensive to add. Jeff was mentioning Boolean, I think at the beginning of the session. So Boolean is not part of 21C. So we got JSON data type in one release, and this was actually quite a big effort. It's not getting
adding new data types is very, very, very tricksy.
Actually, adding the data type is just one file. You can add a new data type in 20 minutes, but making it work with import, export, replication, all the queries, etc., that takes a lot of people, a lot of time. Yes.
Everything I showed today, I have either a video, a slide deck, or a blog post. If you just search on JSON in my blog, you'll find all of this stuff. If you can't find anything, email me, and I know sure as heck Beta's cool if you reach him online or offline as well. We're both on Twitter, although it's probably better to find Beta. What's the best way to get you, Beta? On your blog or?
No, Twitter would be fine.
Twitter?
Yeah.
Not, they shouldn't just go to your house or?
They can come to my house. They can come to my house. They get a shovel and need to work on the garden before they.
So like your dad, right?
I learned with the best. I learned with the best.
All right. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
This has been great.
And hope to see you soon in a month.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Yep. Thank you so much, Jeff. Bye.